Chapter 4. The sun had long since given way to the waning moon, light surrendering to darkness. Lost were the souls who wandered the barren lands to the south of Elias's den, ever scouring the earth for more than what the land had to offer. The woods themselves seemed to have given up hope, the branches of trees rotting away to the dry, beaten earth below. It was here, amid this dimly lit grove, that wickedness remained vigilant.
"Oh, you must think me the silliest pup."
The voice was manic, echoing over the walls of the jagged den.
"The sneaking, the planning, the precautions, it must all look so tedious."
The pads of his feet paced restlessly back and forth, kicking up the dust of a finely ground white substance.
"But what would you know of it? I've gone farther than you could even dreamed of, and that was by my merit."
As he continued, his words were sharper, more frustrated than the last. After a few moments of eerie silence, the pads of his feet suddenly came to a halt. He snapped his head around to the rear of the den. The yellow of his eyes were all that was visible, the dark of his coat lost in the shadows of night.
"I am not being obsessive. I'm fulfilling my purpose,"
he demanded, seemingly defending himself to only the solitude of his territory. A few more seconds of silence followed before he began again, this time louder and sharper.
"Shut up! I won't listen to your ramblings anymore. If you have a problem with what I'm trying to achieve, then you can just scurry off on your own to die."
Again he was met with silence, only for his fevered pace to once more break the thickening tension. This went on for several minutes until a silhouette beamed at the entrance of the den. With a quiet step she entered, a gray wolf of medium build, an air of resoluteness. The brown of her eyes narrowed as she detected the shift of anxious pause. Before proceeding into the den, she called worriedly over the darkness.
"Lazarus?"
This was enough to shake him from his daze, and he followed the familiar voice to the den's opening. For a moment he was despondent and silent as he became aware of her presence. It wasn't until she called for him again that he could regain his composure.
"Lazarus."
"Come in."
His tone did not reveal an inviting warmth, but rather hinted at annoyance. Still, she pushed slowly forward as her eyes adjusted to the dark. She could make out Lazarus's figure near the heart of the den, his still frame, though small, proving daunting in its boldness.
"Have you eaten today?"
she asked, brows knitted with obvious concern.
"When have I had time to eat? Between running a pack of idiots and trying to locate that damned wolf?"
"Lazarus, everything is running smoothly. Many of the packs nearby have agreed to join us. You can leave the recruitment to me. Just focus on finding the dyer."
"And what of the pack of drooling idiots? Leave them alone too long and they'll likely destroy our faction."
"You know I can handle things around here. They know better than to step out of line. If anything should happen, I will put them in their place."
Though she could not see it, she could sense the corners of his lips curve into a wicked grin. He took a step nearer to her, leaning in so that the hot of his breath could be felt on her muzzle.
"Ah, my dear Amalia. You are truly the only one that understands priorities around here. Perhaps I should reward you for your services.
His words were hushed, almost seductive in their cooing. A blush stained her cheeks as his words sent shivers up her spine. Her heart throbbed relentlessly beneath his powerful stare, and she gave in to his advances without hesitation. The following morning had greeted them with harsh sunlight, waking Amalia, who squinted her eyes in the blazing light. Beside her had been Lazarus, still sound asleep, and she smiled down at his curled-up position. She stooped her head down, gently licking his muzzle, and watching as his ears twitched at the feeling. He grumbled, his foot now twitching.
"Lazarus?"
She whispered into his ear, and once more he flinched at her voice. He moved his head into her side, burying himself in the thick of her fur. Surprised by his actions, she tipped her head only to release a short giggle as he nuzzled against her.
"I'm sorry for yelling."
His voice was barely audible against her fur.
"What? What do you mean?"
Once again she broke out into a fit of laughter, feeling the tender, playful bites he was now placing along her side. He resembled an innocent pup, uncharacteristically soft and vulnerable.
"Please, don't be mad at me."
He spoke once more, his tone bearing an unfamiliar meekness.
"Lazarus, I'm not mad,
Lazarus, sir." Amalia was interrupted by the sound of a loud voice that boomed from the opening of the den. At this, Lazarus was suddenly alert, eyes darting open and looking from his female companion to the male who stood at the entrance. In seconds he had been on his feet, any sign of his previous affection gone and forgotten.
What is it?
The rough in his voice was proof of his annoyance, and the black wolf on the other end flinched at his callousness. There's news on the beast. At this, Lazarus's slit eyes widened, and he hurried himself to the other wolf without word to his companion. Amalia sighed, feeling disheartened at the sudden dejection. She had been used to Lazarus running off whenever business had called, but it did not lessen the blow of his dismissal. She had convinced herself that he had just been under extreme pressure, and that once things settled down they could return to the way they used to be. It was this thought that gave her strength, and she was determined to see out Lazarus's dreams. With a rough shake of her head, she had attempted to erase the negativity that threatened to consume her. Though once her cranium had come to rest, her eyes were greeted with a familiar and disturbing sight. Just a few feet away from her paws sat a large canine skull. The empty sockets where its eyes should be stared at her with malcontent. Each of her hairs stood on end at the sight of it, knowing that these cracked and brittle bones had slept among them during the night. She outstretched her paw, pushing the object away from her, so that it was now facing the rear of the den. With a sigh she sat up, eyes still lingering on the skull.
No offense, but you really creep me out,
she uttered softly, mind beginning to wander to a place that now seemed so long ago. She could still see a young and determined Lazarus, his ambition and energy far greater than any she had ever known. He had always had a certain spark about him, a flame that seemed to never die. For years she had followed in his footsteps, wishing only to give him everything he sought after, everything she knew he deserved. In fact, she could hardly recall a time without him being by her side, which had now become something sparse. Perhaps this was the reason she worked so hard to achieve his dreams. If he had gotten what he wished for, things would finally be different. These were the ideals that she focused upon, that she would do everything in her power to see come to fruition.
Amalia?
The voice of her lover called with authority, quickly breaking her strand of daydreams. With powerful steps he approached, and she rose to all fours in his presence. His eyes fell upon the skull near Amalia's feet, and his eyes narrowed with wicked realization.
Did the two of you have a nice chat?
Amalia looked nervously at the object, returning to meet Lazarus's gaze with skeptical eyes.
I wouldn't say that.
Her tone revealed her nervousness, and Lazarus only grinned at her behavior.
Now. I expect my two favorite gals to get along.
When she did not respond, he continued.
I would hate for us to all be on the wrong paw.
Lazarus.
Amalia.
Before she could present her thoughts to him, he interrupted.
I'm glad you understand me. I can't say the same for anyone else.
At this confession, Amalia could not find it in herself to object. As strange as his behavior had been, she did not have the heart to correct him. It was clear that he needed her, and she tried convincing herself that his delusions were simply odd quirks. As long as it didn't harm him, she made up her mind to continue in silence. After all, he needed her to be understanding.
I'm always on your side, Lazarus, you know that.
Yes. That's why I've entrusted you to run this Forsaken pack with me. You are capable of getting things done. Speaking of which...
He paused, the conversation now taking a serious turn.
The beast was sighted past the river, about a 4-day walk from here.
Should I assemble the hunters?
Yes, I want them ready to leave by tonight.
Of course, I'll be sure to lead them to victory.
No.
His words were rough, and she tipped her head questioningly.
The diet takes priority right now. You will accompany me and the others.
Understood.
Get the pack ready for departure. We'll be heading north by sunrise.
Consider it done.
With a nod of compliance, she had made motion to leave, not once questioning his orders.
Oh, and Amalia.
His voice was deeper, and the tense of his muscles was visible in his stance.
You know what to do with those that are too weak for the journey.
She stalled, expression wavering at what he had been suggesting. Stifling her apprehension, she nodded, forcing herself onward. Once alone, Lazarus had set his sights on an all-too-familiar item, the tip of his tongue running over his muzzle with wicked intent.
It won't be long now. The heart of the dyer will be mine.
He placed a heavy paw on top of the scalp, expression laced with fevered desire.
I won't let anyone stop me. Even you. Mother?